Hello everybody, here we're going to take a look at timers. Timers are a unique control object that you'll find in your toolbox that are very versatile for what they can do. Okay, so I've got a little program here called Blinky, and I'll just run it for you once real quick. But when Blinky's running here, you'll notice that there's a little timer going down here, just a second at a time. You'll also notice that there's a box here that's blinking colors. What this actually is just a label where the back color is changing on an interval here. If I click the go button, you'll notice that some other objects start changing their colors as well. You notice my little countdown timer over here got to 0. And it's not really do anything, but it got to 0 there. If I wanted something to happen, it could. If I click stop here, my buttons and the background color of my form quit changing there. So all of this stuff here is just happening with different use of timers here. So let's take a look at how this works. Now, once you add a timer to your program from the toolbox, there's nothing you can see on the form. It doesn't have a graphical component to it, but it shows up in a tray down here. Okay, and you just name them with the prefix TMR and then some type of descriptive name for the timer. So there's a few different ones in here. Now, when it comes to properties for a timer, here's one that's called timer countdown. That happens to be the one in the bottom right corner of the form. There was a little timer counting down starting at 30 until it got to 0. So that's this timer here. You notice there's an enabled property that's true. You'll remember when I opened up the Blinky program, that 30-second timer just started timing down right away, and that's because the timer was enabled by default here right away, so that this timer started running as soon as the form was opened. Okay, the interval here is in milliseconds, so if I put 1,000 in there, that's going to be 1 second. So you can play with that time as you go here. Now, as far as this enabled property, again, once real quick, there were some things like the color changing and stuff that didn't happen when I first opened the form. So that enabled property was set to false, so that timer wasn't running until I did something like click the go button. So let's take a look here at the code for that timer countdown tick event right here. So here we have, this is a tick event is the default event for a timer. So when you double click on the timer over in the design window, you'll get this, or if you pick your timer object up here and pick tick event, you can put this in here. So here's my code for setting up this little timer that was counting down. I guess it was from 25 seconds, not 30. So notice here that I have static int time as an integer 25, and then I'm subtracting. This is a shortcut here. This is the same as saying int time equals int time minus 1. So it holds what it had before minus 1, and then I'm just updating a label text with that variable. Okay, and this little if then here, that if it gets to 0, I'm stopping this timer. There are just two methods to use with a timer, and that's the timer name dot stop stops the timer. Timer name dot start is going to start a timer if it wasn't started in the first place. So what you can think of this here is exactly like another looping structure, really. This tick event will re-execute the code that's inside of here on whatever the interval was in the properties window over there. So this was set on a second, or 1,000 milliseconds. So essentially what I have here is a tick event that's going to repeat every second and subtract 1 from 25. And because this is static, it's not going to reset. If I just had a dim statement here, it would come in and reset to 25 each time, and it would just go down 1 and back to 25, each time. So I want to make sure it's static so that it gets set to 25, then it doesn't redimension again, and it will count down like you saw on the screen. So it's kind of like I said, this is just kind of another type of looping structure kind of thing. As for some of these other timers that were on here, Okay, remember we had that label up at the top of the screen that was kind of flashing between a few different colors. If we go over to the timer 3, what interval was it on again? Let's look at the property real quick for timer 3. It was only on 100 milliseconds, so it was flashing fairly quickly, right? You'll also notice, so I should have shown you over here, that its enabled property was true. So as soon as the program opens, this was happening right here. But it's a little bit different thing going on here. I dimensioned an integer called color pick, created a random number. I'm using the old random number generation here, but you get the idea. So it's randomly creating a number between 1 and 3, and then if it's 1, it changes the label's back color to this color. If it's a 2, it's a different color. If it's a 3, it's a different color. So here again, this every 100 milliseconds, this tick event is firing and changing that label's color. And it just kind of repeatedly does it throughout the whole program. Kind of a pointless thing, but just showing you that a logic structure could be used for that. Timer 1 second. So this is a timer that's set, another timer that's set for 1 second here. Let's go over and look at how it was set up here. Timer 1 second, and we go to the properties for that. So it's set for a second. Notice its enabled property is false. So it's not turned on when the program first opens. So something has to happen before timer 1 second will get started. It's not running by default. You'll notice here that there were those go and stop buttons on the form, right? So when I click the go and stop buttons, I'm starting timer 1 and starting timer 2 because they both were set, their enabled properties were false in the design window. So I can just start them when they click this button, and I said to stop them when they click this button. And that's the only two methods I need to worry about for timer tick events. So these are just kind of different things to show you how you could utilize a lot of different logic structures and just the properties of some things with a timer. So here again, I've got an integer variable that's set called switch that's set to 0 statically, and in int switch, when it's 0, it sets the back color. See, me refers to the form, right? So now the back color of the form is going to change to a different color, and I change int switch to 1. I add 1 to it, so the next time this happens 2 seconds later, because it was set to 2 seconds, it's going to be 1. It's going to change the back color of the form to light steel blue. 2 seconds later, when it gets in here, it's going to be 2. And it's going to change the back color to a different color, and then it changes that variable back to 0. So this one just kind of cycles through these 3 options every 2 seconds, right? Timer 1 second has a Boolean variable into it. If you remember, Boolean variables are just true or false. So the Boolean variable switch in here is true, and when this timer gets set, if that's true, then it's going to change the back colors of the buttons and switch boost switch to false. So the next 1 second later, when boost switch is false, it's going to use these to change the buttons to a different color and then change the Boolean variable back to true. So this basically just flip-flops back and forth between these two every second, right? So obviously some of them maybe aren't the most useful things in the world that I'm just flashing colors or whatever, right? But I wanted to make the point to you that timers could be used for a lot of different things other than just a timer like I'm doing here. Obviously, I could have a timer that when it hits 0, something happens and I don't let the user do something, or the user has to do something, whatever it is. But you can use it to change properties of objects on your form. You could also use it, I didn't show you in here, but you could use it for some simple animations. If you had say, some pictures that slightly change the object of picture, you know how a little flip book works where everything changes a little bit in each picture? I could have a timer that went at a certain speed and changed the picture in a picture box to make an animation. Or I could use a timer to change the location of something. We'll get into some of the drawing class stuff later, but I could use a timer to move something around on a form as well. So that's just some basic stuff about timers. They're pretty easy to work with, but they're pretty dynamic in the number of things that you could do with them. So you're going to add some timers to your word guess game again for this week to make a third version of that program.